Whoa! You notice that? You see how fucking smooth that looks? Well, you couldn't before because YouTube just enabled the ability to play at a higher frame rate. We did it, everyone!
I'm dizzy.
Yes.
Way back in June, YouTube announced plans to roll out support for 48 and even 60 frames per second videos, which is a hell of a lot higher than what YouTube had previously allowed, which is a measly, weak, disgusting, casual 29.97 or 30 frames per second.
Yeah, so what does this mean for you, the viewer?
Well, let's get into what each frame rate is traditionally used for in most forms of media.
Yep, starting out with 24 frames per second. In the 1930s, shortly after sound film was introduced, studios updated their equipment to an industry standard for 35mm film so that there would be some stability across the medium. Before this, motion pictures were shown anywhere between 16 frames per second and 26 frames per second.
So when you watch something in 24 frames per second, it gives it what people like to call the film look, just because it's what our eyes are used to seeing at movie theaters for the last 100-some odd years.
Yep.
When TV came along, the American TV industry decided on 60i, which isn't necessarily a frame rate, it's actually a field rate. And it's gonna get real confusing now. The I stands for interlaced, and the fields in an interlaced rate are tiny horizontal rows that refresh in an odd, even order. I really hope to God we can find footage to demonstrate what that means because it's hard as hell to actually explain.
Yeah. Anyway, 60i basically boils down to 30 frames per second, or rather 29.97 frames per second, because old broadcast equipment couldn't handle 30 frames of color video without interference, and for whatever reason, the standard has stuck for the last 61 years.
I'm pretty sure it could handle 30 at this point,
Yeah.
but nope, we're stuck with it. So today, with digital video, most devices record at 29.97. Higher end cameras have options for 23.976 or 60 or 120, but 29.97, aka 30, is still pretty much the standard, and that's the standard that YouTube has been following for its uploads.
Yep. So it's also the frame rate that we edit and export our videos at until today.
That's right!
Look at that! Huh? Want some of that? Just yesterday, YouTube started allowing videos to play at 60 frames per second, and we decided to shoot today's very special episode at 60 frames.
Now there are two things that people need to know right off the bat.
Not 3D, why?
Now there are two things that people know right off the bat that they have actually seen or at least heard of running at higher frame rates like 48 or 60. There's Call of Duty and then the Hobbit movies.
Yeah. When the Hobbit movie started coming out, the ability to see it in theaters at 48 frames per second was a major selling point. And certainly you've heard jokes about how Call of Duty is so superior to Battlefield because of COD's ability to run at 60 frames per second.
So why is YouTube breaking into the 60 frames per second zone?
Well, first off, it's because broadcasters are preparing for a shift in television standards that will reportedly be set in place in the near future that will move over to 60 frames. So obviously YouTube wants to be at the forefront of that when it's commonplace because, as we all know, internet media services are slowly but surely taking over as the go-to place for content instead of things like cable and satellite. So these services need to be prepared in advance for any shifts like this.
And secondly, and this is the big one, what is the most viewed content on YouTube?
Russian dash cam videos?
No, it's fucking video games. And like we said before, many of those games, including Call of Duty, can be played and captured at 60 frames per second. Up until this point, the games were basically being down-res by YouTube's players so that, although they were still available in high def,
they didn't look as good as PC and console.
No.
So now with the addition of this feature to YouTube, any game you capture at 60 frames will appear like that on YouTube, and some of the examples we've seen so far are pretty fucking incredible looking.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
some great Mario Kart footage already out there, League of Legends, stuff like that, and now preparing for Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, that's gonna be, all the videos you're gonna see are probably gonna be at 60 frames.
Some of the best fucking no-scope montages are coming
Yeah,
this winter.
Yeah.
And we have no idea what this will entail for content creators who shoot live action stuff, or if they'll even want to use it. I know that we don't prefer it. Frankly, this video looks like shit, and anytime I accidentally watch a movie or show at 120 hertz, it looks like shit as well. So we'll probably just keep going with the standard frame rate.
Yeah, last year during the Breaking Bad finale, my roommates have a TV that upreses it to make it look like 60 frames. I couldn't even watch it. I had to like watch it on my computer instead because it looked like a soap opera.
Yeah, it's the same if you go to a bar and they're playing a drama like right after a football game.
Yeah.
Like football looks good at higher frame rates, but if Mad Men goes on right after that. You look like, it just looked like garbage.
Yeah. Now, if you've gotten this far and you're like, I have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, so far you can only view videos in 60 frames if you're watching them at 720p and 1080p, and you need to be watching them on either Chrome or Safari. So get that weak Internet Explorer shit out of here.
So what do you think? Is this gonna make video games even more ubiquitous on YouTube?
Whoops. What would you like to see in 60 frames as far as live action goes? I mean,
Porn.
Yes. Well, that's a great idea, Elliot.